Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're going to give it another minute just to let folks trickle in, and then we'll get started. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us for the reporting webinar for equipment rebate voucher recipients. So if you are pursuing a traditional grant or only a technical assistance voucher, we won't cover any of that. So now is your time to hop off. This is just for equipment rebate vouchers only. All right, welcome everyone. We're just giving it another minute to let folks trickle in. So if you have a question, I see we've got a hand raised, please put it in the chat and we'll be responding in the chat. We will be taking the questions and answering them live at the end of this meeting. If you are having any trouble seeing the slides or hearing us, we encourage you to leave and then rejoin the webinar. So that usually addresses folks' technical issues. All right, it looks like we've got a great group of folks here, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. And so thank you for joining us today for the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant Program Equipment Rebate Voucher Reporting Webinar. I am delighted to kick us off this afternoon. My name is Allison Robinson. I serve as the voucher manager on the EECBG program team. I will also be joined today by DOE colleagues from both the voucher team and the NEPA team, as well as folks from ICF, who is the portal and rebate administrator. This Teams call is being recorded and may be posted on DOE's website or used internally. So if you do not wish to have your voice recorded, please do not speak during the call. If you do not wish to have your image recorded, please turn off your camera or participate by joining by phone. If you speak during the call or use a video connection, you are presumed to be having consent to recording and use of your voice or image. Throughout the presentation, we encourage you to use the chat to ask questions. We will reserve 15 minutes at the end of the session to answer questions. And we'll also be dropping relevant links into the presentation throughout. If we're not able to answer your question today, please follow up by sending an email to eecbg@hq.doe.gov. We also encourage you to check out the FAQ tab on the website. Next slide, please. So you might be hearing some pings. So we want to show you how to mute your chat. You're going to click those 3 buttons up at the top where it says More. And then you'll have a drop-down menu, and then you'll click Settings, and then you'll see Mute Notifications. And don't show chat bubbles. So we encourage you to take a moment to do that. And so again, you can see at the top, there's a chat feature. So do be putting your questions into the chat at this time. Thank you. Next slide, please. Right, the purpose of this webinar is that we will be discussing key reporting requirements for the EECBG equipment rebate vouchers. We'll also be discussing key deadlines for meeting these requirements and how you can submit online. We'll include a demo of the portal and show how you can be submitting these, in addition to showing you external links if a report is not going to be submitted through the voucher portal. This presentation is for EECBG program eligible local governments and tribes that have submitted applications for equipment rebate vouchers. We will not be discussing technical assistance vouchers in this webinar, nor will we be discussing traditional grants. Next slide, please. So why does reporting matter? Reporting is important as it facilitates communication and information sharing between the voucher recipient and the DOE voucher team. while ensuring compliance and progress on projects and reducing the risk for waste, fraud, and abuse. Reporting also provides DOE with current and accurate data to understand program impact. Next slide. So here are some updates from this webinar. We've been trying to host these quite regularly. So if you have not attended a webinar before, that's totally fine. If you've attended before, that's also great. And so here is what we will be discussing that may not have been discussed in previous webinars. We're going to do a deeper dive into Davis-Bacon Act reporting requirements, including looking at how to register an LCP tracker. We're also going to expand the information we provide on the NEPA logs and a detailed explanation of NEPA reporting, including the historic preservation, and you'll be able to hear from the NEPA team directly today. We're also going to take another look at a deeper look at the financial report. That's the SF425, and really dive into how you as a local government or tribe would complete this report. And then, as I mentioned before, we're going to have a live demo about reviewing and completing reporting requirements in the voucher portal. So we do want to note that this webinar, as it's being recorded, it will be available on the website in the coming weeks, and it will replace the October 10th, 2024 reporting webinar. So if you attended that one, this webinar is going to supersede it. Next slide, please. Here's our agenda for today. So momentarily, I'll be turning over to my colleague, Shay Rupinski, who's an OBRISE fellow with DOE. She's going to be giving a reporting overview and then talking about the checklist of the reports and how to submit them. So we're going to be going really in depth with all of these reporting requirements. We really want to equip you with feeling that you have an understanding of these reports, what they're for, how to complete them, and where to complete them. Then we'll have a demo, and this demo will show you how exactly to complete reporting in the portal. We're going to share some resources and FAQs that we've seen in our program. And then lastly, we'll have a Q&A session. Next slide, please. So reporting 101, how often do I need to report? The reporting process begins once your application is approved by DOE and you begin your project work. Some of these reports are project specific, so they may not be applicable to your specific project. For example, Davis-Bacon Act only applies when you're hiring a third-party contractor to install your equipment, so it may not be applicable to your project if there's no installation needed, or if your own internal staff is installing. And then the amount of the reporting you'll do also varies. So Davis-Bacon Act does have a weekly reporting requirement during the project installation period. Some other reports are just twice yearly or just annual. The historic preservation report is an annual report. As always, we'll take a deeper dive into these specific requirements later. We do want to note that all final reports are due 120 calendar days after the end of your voucher period performance. So that's when you've completed all of your payments, all of your equipment's installed, you've completed payments, and you're ready to begin the post-installation reimbursement process. That ends your project period and begins the 120 days of all of your final reports being due. Next slide. So who should report? So equipment rebate voucher recipients. Hopefully all of you are that. And this includes lead applicants for any teams. So if you're a member of a team and you're the lead applicant, that's who's responsible for reporting. Where are you going to report? You're going to report in the voucher portal. That's where you submitted your application. And this is the primary platform for not only revising your application if your project changes, but also for submitting reporting requirements. We will note if a report should be submitted to a location other than the voucher portal. And if you're having any technical issues with the voucher portal, we encourage you to email the portal administrator. Their email address is eecbgvouchers@icf.com, and they'll be able to provide assistance. Next slide. So what is DOE's role in reporting and monitoring? So DOE's is your partner in that we will work with you to ensure that you're able to meet reporting requirements. And then we're also reviewing these reports to support your project success. So we're looking to assess progress towards goals and objectives, determine compliance with federal rules and regulations, track fiscal expenditures. And so that's when we do our desktop monitoring. And then we may be on site to do a site visit and conduct monitoring to provide in-person technical assistance or to ensure and verify compliance with all federal regulations and program guidance, and also to highlight the success stories and the impact that EECBG has had in your community. Next slide, please. At this point, I would like to turn it over to my colleague Shay, and she will begin the reporting overview.
Yeah, thank you, Allison, and hello, everyone. As Allison said, in this section, we'll begin with a quick reporting overview. Next slide, please. The reporting requirements of equipment rebate vouchers are covered in the Federal Assistance Reporting Checklist, which is sent to you via email upon project application approval. The Federal Assistance Reporting Checklist includes a checklist of all potential required reports for equipment rebate vouchers, as well as a detailed description of each requirement, including where each report should be submitted. Please note that this form is generalized for all voucher recipients, so please read carefully as not all reports will be required for all projects. For example, NEPA logs, Davis-Bacon Act reporting, and the single audit report may or may not apply to your project. Next slide. Here we have listed out all reporting requirements that are included in the Federal Assistance Reporting Checklist. In total, there are about 8 reports that may be required for your project. Please note again that Davis-Bacon Act reports, NEPA logs, and single audits will be listed as if applicable, as they may not apply to all projects. Copies of the reports listed here can be found for your reference in multiple places, including the Federal Assistance Reporting Checklist, the Voucher Portal, and grants.gov. In addition, the Voucher Portal now has a complete reporting section that will guide you through all reporting requirements, as well as have links to forms and pre-filled examples. We suggest you use the Voucher Portal as your one-stop shop to review your reporting needs and complete these requirements. Next slide. As mentioned in the last slide, not all reporting requirements will apply to all projects, specifically Davis-Bacon, NEPA logs, and single audits. Here are some tips to help you figure out if these reporting requirements will apply to your project. First, Davis-Bacon Act reports will apply to anyone that uses a contractor to install equipment, even if those costs are not covered by EECBG funding. Next, NEPA logs only need to be completed by entities using a NEPA SO1 for their project, or in other words, are completing ground disturbance to install their equipment. Last, single audits need to be completed by any entity that receives a certain amount of federal funding each year. If you apply before October 1st, 2024, then that threshold is $750,000. If you applied on or after October 1st, 2024, then that threshold will be increased to $1 million in federal funding. This includes all federal funding received by your government, not just EECBG program funding. Next slide. Okay, so I know throughout advertisement of this program, we've said that the equipment rebate vouchers will have reduced reporting burdens. However, after reviewing this list of reports, you may be feeling like that might not be the case or even a little overwhelmed, which is understandable. So have we actually reduced the reporting burden for equipment rebate recipients? First, we wanted to note that by law, equipment rebate vouchers are considered federal assistance and are therefore subject to the same reporting requirements as other federal grants. That being said, the EECBG program team has worked to reduce reporting requirements within these guidelines in a few ways. First, the frequency of reporting for equipment rebates is significantly reduced compared to grants. Reports such as the performance report and financial reports are due up to 4 times a year or quarterly for some traditional grants. However, for equipment rebate vouchers, these reports are due annually or just once if you finish your project in the first year. In addition, our program uses NEPA SOs, which eliminate the need for every entity to file an EQ1 with the NEPA office and receive a unique determination for their project. This can save a significant amount of time for your staff. Furthermore, entities may choose non-ground disturbing projects, which eliminates the need for NEPA logs. In terms of Davis-Bacon Act requirements, Entities can choose to use in-house staff for installation, which exempts them from DBA reporting. Next, while it might not feel lucky to have a formula allocation of less than $250,000, it does make you exempt from having to comply with Build America, Buy America requirements. In addition to the Build America, Buy America Small Grants waiver, the Good Jobs report has been eliminated for all equipment recipients, full stop. Last but not least, as we said, the voucher portal now has a complete reporting section, which consolidates reporting requirements into one place. This means that the voucher portal can be used as a one-stop shop for reviewing and completing reporting requirements. While some reporting requirements might not be better than none, we hope that this does demonstrate that the equipment rebate option does have a reduced reporting burden when compared to the traditional grant. Next slide. Okay, next we're going to do a deep dive into every individual report. A demo of how to review these reports and complete them in the voucher portal will follow this section. Next slide. The first required report is the Tangible Personal Property Report, or Post-Installation Report. If you have read some of our voucher guidance closely, such as the Voucher Handbook, you may have noticed that an installation report is required for equipment rebates. The Tangible Personal Property Report serves as the post-installation report and will be used to verify the purchase and installation of eligible equipment and actual dollars spent. To drive that point home, I want to repeat that the Tangible Personal Property Report serves as the installation report and is required to verify purchases and receive your reimbursement. A final report is due within 30 days of completing equipment installation and payment. This report includes standard form SF428, SF428B, and SF428S. In addition to these forms, invoices, receipts, and timestamp photos should also be submitted. Please send raw photos and do not PDF them. This next comment is incredibly important for ensuring that you receive your voucher payment. In order to receive payment, you must ensure that the Tangible Personal Property Report lists an accurate and active Unique Entity Identifier, or UEI number from SAM.gov. Note that some governments have more than one UEI number, so please ensure that the one you list on this form is where you actually want your payments to be sent. Reimbursement will be issued by an electronic check to the bank account associated with the UEI number listed on this report. In addition, please make sure that your UEI is active in SAM.gov prior to submitting this report, as they periodically need renewed. The Tangible Personal Property Report will be completed using a module in the voucher portal, which we will review in the next section. The module can be found by logging into the portal, selecting My Application, clicking on the application, then post-installation. Next slide. Here, we wanted to make a quick note about filling out Form SF428S. Form SF428S asks you to list out by line item each piece of equipment you purchased for your EECBG project. If you're on this call and plan to purchase hundreds or even thousands of LED lights, you might be wondering if you're expected to list out each lighting unit individually. The answer is probably not. Form SF428S does not need to be filled out for some projects based on when you applied and the per unit cost of the purchased materials. There are two cases in which SF428S does not need to be filled out, so please listen closely. First, if your application was submitted on October 1st, 2024, prior to October 1st, 2024, then you do not need to complete SF428S for equipment purchases with a per unit cost of $5,000 or less. Alternatively, if your application was submitted on or after October 1st, 2024, then you do not need to complete Form SF428S for equipment purchases with a per unit cost of $10,000 or less. This threshold change for costs from $5,000 to $10,000 is due to a change in 2 CFR 200. This change took effect on October 1st, 2024, which is why it is important to pay attention to your application date when determining if you need this form during closeout. Please refer to the examples on the slide to help you determine if you need to complete Form SF428S. Next slide. Finally, please note that if you ever dispose of the equipment purchased with the EECBG program funding, you will also need to request disposition instructions from DOE by submitting standard form SF428C. This form is only needed at time of disposition or sale and not at project closeout or following installation. Next slide. The next required report for all equipment rebate voucher recipients is the performance report. The performance report details activity status, milestones, financial metrics, process metrics, and qualitative descriptions. Milestones will detail if you met your project goals. In other words, if you successfully purchased and installed your intended type and quantity of equipment. The financial metrics will detail the total funds expended on your project, received from DOE through the EECBG program. The process metrics section of this report is particularly important as it will ask you to quantify actual energy savings from your project according to bipartisan infrastructure law metrics. Examples of bill metrics you may be asked to report on include estimated kilowatt hours of electricity saved annually or total capacity of solar systems installed. A full list of bill process metrics can be viewed by following the link in this slide once available online or by visiting the EECBG Program application hub at any time. Conversely to metrics, the qualitative description section provides an opportunity for you to share a written narrative of project successes and challenges along the way. Some stories may even be shared publicly by DOE. The performance report will be completed using a module in the Voucher portal, which will be demoed in the next section of this webinar. The report can be found by logging into the portal, navigating to your application, and clicking on either the annual or final performance report, depending on which is due. The performance report is due both annually by October 31st and as a final report within 120 days of project closeout. Please note, if you've not started work on your project by the end of the annual reporting period, the annual performance report will be waived. However, you must attest no work has been done in the portal by navigating to the annual performance report. In addition, if you complete your entire project within the first annual reporting period for your project, you may submit this report just once as a final report. Next slide. The next required report for all equipment rebate voucher recipients is the financial report, or standard form SF425. The financial report details better expenditures and where you will report total dollars received from EECBG program and general expenditures. The financial report is completed by filling out standard form SF425 and uploading it to the voucher portal. This is done by logging into the portal, selecting My Applications, clicking on the application, then reporting. The financial report is due both annually by October 31st and as a final report within 120 days of project closeout. Please note, if you have not yet started work on your project by the end of your first annual reporting period, the annual financial report will be waived. In addition, if you complete your entire project within the first annual reporting period for your project, you may submit this report just once as a final report. Next slide. Okay. Here we have some quick tips for filling out your financial report, but I'm actually going to turn it over to my colleague Andrea from ICF to review this report with you.
Great. Thank you, Shay. Good afternoon, everyone. So today we're going to walk through how to fill out the SF425 form. Some of you may know it as the Federal Financial Report, or FFR, depending on how long you've been working with grants. But most of you will recognize it as the 425. I will be sharing my screen here so that we can walk through the form together. There's a few data points that are important to pay attention to when filling out this form. The first is making sure that the form is not expired as you before you fill it out. And for that, you will look at the top right-hand corner of the form up here and make sure that your form date has not lapsed. Online, when you look up SF425, there are many times where you will find a form that has previously expired. So just make sure you are going to grants.gov or using the link on our portal. Otherwise, you might run into the risk of finding an expired form floating around in the internet. The other important part of the 425 is making sure that the information in the initial boxes matches other information in the other forms you will submit. So Shay was just talking about the SF428, for example, and we want all of that information to be similar across the board. So in box 1 and 2, we want that information to reflect your application number and the federal agency, DOE, that is providing the funding. You will notice that box 1 and 2 are going to be in most other forms that you need to fill out for this project. As we move down the form in box number 3, we should pay specific attention to the recipient organization information for two reasons. One, as we mentioned before, the information on these forms is being reviewed for fraud, waste, and abuse. So we want all of the information to match the information in your application. So for your government name or your tribe name, make sure that you're putting in the information as it is listed in your account. In terms of street address, please do the same. We know that maybe the project is being handled by, the Department of Community Services or the Parks Department, and everybody has different addresses. But try to use the address that is present in your SAM.gov record. That is your address of record, and it will greatly help us determine that the right entity is submitting the information. If the addresses don't match, you may receive an email from us just double checking that the address actually matches your entity, and that may delay your reimbursement process a little bit. 4A is the most important piece of this form. As Shay mentioned, the UEI, or Unique Entity Identifier, it is the data point that determines where your payment will go. So if this number does not match the number that has been entered in Salesforce, you will get an email from us because we want to make sure that the money goes to the right entity. The other important piece of this is if you are putting your UEI here, make sure you let somebody in your accounting department know that there is a payment coming from DOE. Sometimes program and accounting are not necessarily on the same page, and the accounting folks may not know that there's money coming in because it is all automatically done through electronic checks. So make sure that you verify your UEI with your accounting or finance department and let them know that there is a payment from DOE coming based on your approved reimbursement. For boxes 4B and 5, you do not need to enter any information. The UEI takes care of all of that, so you can skip those, leave them blank, or place NA. When it comes to box 6, this is part of the reporting requirements that Shay was just talking about. In this case, you don't have to worry about quarterly or semi-annual reports for the EECBG program. However, you do need to indicate whether this is an annual submission or a final submission. Again, final submissions are once your project is complete and payment has been received. That is your closeout document, whereas your annual report is going to be submitted as your project is ongoing. For the basis of accounting question, this is something that generally trips people up. And one of the best ways to get this question right is just to confirm with your accounting department and your finance folks. This is the basis of accounting for your entity. So either it can be a cash or accrual, and it'll impact the way in which box 10, which is the detail of all of your financials, will be filled out. So definitely important to make sure that your finance and accounting department provide you with an answer on this one if you're not sure. Generally, this information can also be found on financial reports or budget reports in case you want to find it yourself. For your project or grant period, you want to fill this information in with your grant start date, which you can find in the rebate portal or in the voucher portal, sorry. And then add 2 years from that start date, and that is your project period of performance period. And then your reporting period is going to be the fiscal year, the federal fiscal year through which you are reporting. So in this case, it will generally be September 30th of whatever calendar year we find ourselves in. You have any questions? I know this is a lot of information. Please feel free to put them in the chat and we will address those shortly. Once we get to box 10, this is kind of where the meat of this report is, right? After all, this is the financial report. So this is the information we're really trying to track down. First, we're going to get information from you about the federal cash. In this case, you have received your award from EECBG, and hopefully You will only have to fill this in for your single award. This form is submitted per award. So if you have other federal funding, even if it's from DOE or from other agencies, just note that this is for your EECBG voucher only. For 10A, you're going to enter your cash receipts. So that is cash that you have received from the EECBG program. That's your reimbursements. For cash disbursements, you are going to enter any payments made from EECBG program funds. So in this case, in B, you will enter your expenditures, things that have left your bank. And in A, you will put in things that have, or funding that has entered your bank. Then C will calculate on its own. If you have not received a reimbursement, this number could be a negative, right? You have spent money, but haven't been reimbursed yet. Once you have received your reimbursement, the amount should be 0, unless there are discrepancies in terms of how much was approved. But generally, this would be a 0. Then we'll move into federal expenditures and unobligated balances. Again, this is a lot of financial terminology. So if you have any questions, reach out to your finance folks or send an email to our team, and we are able to help you. For line D specifically, we're talking about total federal funds authorized. This means how much have you been pre-approved to spend at any given time. So after you submit your application, once you receive your pre-approval, that is the amount that you're going to put in here. This doesn't have anything to do with expenditures or expenses or reimbursements. This is just the amount of funding that you are allowed to use. Then we start talking about expenditures. In row E, we look at the federal share of expenditures or payments that you have made with EECBG program funds. This row, I'm going to scroll up a little bit, should match with 10B, your cash disbursements, because we're only talking about one program and we're only talking about one funding source. So whatever number you're putting in E, you want to also put in B. Once we move into F, the federal share of unliquidated obligations, again, more finance terms, this is generally a row for your projects that are in progress, right? For this, it is cost that is owed for equipment or services, but that has not been paid. So you have received an invoice, but you have not paid it at the time you submit this report. It's all about timing. Right? So it is an obligation because you've received an invoice, but it is unliquidated because you haven't paid it yet. If this is your final report and this is a completed or reimbursed project, this amount should be 0, right? At this point, you have paid out all of your vendors for their equipment, for their services, and DOE has also reimbursed you for all the costs. So you should have no unliquidated obligations. For row G, we're talking about the total federal share that will be covered by this program. In this case, there is an automated formula in the form that will add lines E and F to calculate the amount that the federal government through the EECBG program will cover. And finally, H, which is an obligated balance of federal funds. This is any amount of program funding that has been pre-approved but is left over. So if you're not using your entire allocation, you will have a balance here. When it comes to the section on recipient share, this section will remain blank. The EECBG program does not have a requirement for a match, and you do not need to report on voluntary match or voluntary leverage funding. So this section will remain blank. Similar for program income. You will not have to report on program income because this program doesn't lend itself to that. Section 11. This will also remain blank as there should not be any indirect expenses charged to the program. And finally, we get to section 13. The certification is important, again, to ensure a best practice against fraud, waste, and abuse. So make sure you read it before you sign your name on it. And then make sure that you are including your full name, your last name, and your title in case anybody needs to reach you if there are questions on this report later down the line. For signatures, you can use a wet signature, Adobe certified signature, or type in your name. There is flexibility as in how to sign this form, but please make sure that all other information is also included. And finally, submission dates. You want to make sure that the submission date for your form is after your post or your pre-approval and your purchases. You wouldn't necessarily have anything to report if you haven't done any work. So keeping with the sequence of events, the date we are looking for will generally come after you have started your work. So with that, I'm going to pass it back over to my colleague Shay for the rest of the presentation.
Thanks, Andrea. That was great. And then next slide, please. Awesome. So with that, we will start reviewing Davis-Bacon Act requirements. And so as stated, Davis-Bacon Act may or may not apply to your project. So please review DBA requirements closely to determine if they will apply to yours. In general, DBA applies anytime external laborers or contractors are hired to install your equipment, even if EECBG funds are not covering this installation cost. In order to comply with DBA, 2 reports are required, including weekly payroll reports and semi-annual reports. First, weekly payroll reports should be submitted weekly during equipment installation and should include a record of hours worked and wages paid. To reiterate, payroll reports are only required while installation work is occurring. Grantees are responsible for tracking and maintaining DBA records for all contractors. Weekly payroll reports should be submitted using the LCP tracker. If LCP tracker registration is not complete by the time the project begins, entities should collect payroll reports directly from contractors to be uploaded to the tracker retroactively. Next slide. LCP tracker registration is a multi-step process that requires assistance from the voucher team. Before beginning contracted labor to complete equipment installation, entities and contractors should take LCP tracker training. Both live and recorded sessions of the training are available. However, live sessions do offer the benefit of being able to ask questions and converse with a live LCP tracker instructor. To attend a live session, register no later than the day before the class by emailing the address in the slide. A class schedule can also be found by following the link provided. Next, at least 1 month prior to starting DBA activities, sooner if possible, indicate your desire to register in the LCP tracker on the voucher portal. This can be done by logging into the voucher portal, selecting My Application, clicking on the application, then LCP tracker registration. You will be asked to enter some basic project information, including when the labor contract was awarded and the estimated start and completion date for your project. A PDF of prevailing wages will also be required for this step. Prevailing wages can be found on sam.gov by navigating to the site and selecting wage determinations. Once you have completed your indication to register, the voucher team will submit the project details to LCP Tracker for upload. Upon submission, the entity point of contact will receive a confirmation email as well as next steps to complete registration. Note, it may take up to a month to fully complete all steps of LCP Tracker registration, so we highly encourage you to indicate registration as soon as possible. Once your registration is complete, you will be able to add your contractor to your account by following the instructions linked on the slide. Once added, contractors will then be able to upload weekly payroll reports for your review. Note that all users who register an LCP Tracker will have to appear virtually on camera to provide proof of identity to an LCP Tracker support team representative. Next slide. Next, the DBA semi-annual report details entities' compliance and enforcement of the Davis-Bacon Act. The semi-annual DBA report is completed using a Microsoft form, which can be accessed in the voucher portal. Once submitted, you must also attest submission in the voucher portal. This is done by logging into the portal, selecting My Applications, clicking on the application, and reporting. The semi-annual report is due by April 21st and October 21st of each year. This report must be submitted even when no active installation or project work is occurring. If no work has occurred, you may enter NA in applicable fields on this report. Next slide. All right, so next we're going to review some of our NEPA reporting requirements, including the historic preservation report and NEPA logs. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Diana, from the NEPA office for this section.
Great, thank you so much. So just real quickly, just want to present NEPA at a very high level. Not intended to make everyone a NEPA expert, but it's helpful to kind of understand, I think, some of the background information on this. So NEPA is the National Environmental Policy Act, and it requires the Department of Energy to evaluate and determine potential environmental impacts of proposed actions, and those proposed actions are your projects. So we really look at ecological, socioeconomic, cultural, historic, the full bandwidth of potential impacts under what we call the umbrella of NEPA, and that does include historic preservation, also known as Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act. And that really addresses both above ground and below ground resources under historic preservation. Next slide, please. So to assist DOE in addressing historic preservation, we have developed programmatic agreements. All 50 states and most of the territories have these programmatic agreements. Guam is the only territory that does not have a PA. And these PAs are a factor when we're looking at the statement of work number 1 or number 2. So it's really a two-step process. You're going to want to look at your NEPA determination associated with your statement of work, and then follow that up by looking at your programmatic agreement. So each state specific programmatic agreement authorizes certain activities to be exempt from historic preservation consultation, and that's really a review by your state historic preservation office. So what you're going to want to do is look then at your programmatic agreement. We'll include a link here below. It's also included in your statement of work, and you are going to want to review the exempted activities. It's generally under the appendices of the PAs. Some states have a more tailored approach depending on the state historic preservation office. So they're not all called appendices, but the vast majority of them are. That's where you're going to want to look. If your activities are not listed in the exempted category of activities, the programmatic agreement gives you, as the recipient, the authority to consult directly with your state historic preservation office. So it's really important that you review your programmatic agreement. Next slide, please. So with the use of these programmatic agreements comes the requirement to do an annual historic preservation report. So what that means is this is a required report that the Department of Energy has to submit to the Advisory Council for Historic Preservation. And we ask that each recipient submit in a report. The reporting period is or the period of us accepting the report is from September 1 through September 15th of each year. These are generally pretty quick projects, so we anticipate most of these to just have one submission. And we have a portal set up in NMS Forms, and you will see that in your reporting requirements. We will be working to share updated guidance for the annual report with the program. So you're going to be getting guidance on how to complete this report from the folks that you work with. But we really encourage you to work with the program on filling out that document in advance of formally submitting it in the MS Form portal. We just want to ensure that you understand the questions and that the numbers are being documented correctly. But we do have a mailbox, historic preservation at ee.doe.gov, for any questions on this report. Another website that we have is listed at the bottom of this slide. It is our NEPA and Historic Preservation Training website. And you will see in your NEPA determination a requirement for everyone to go to this website and review the PowerPoint presentations. And it gives a broad overview of NEPA and historic preservation with a little bit more detail that I'm going into now. But these are really helpful resources on the website, along with the NEPA logs as well for those of you that have the requirement of quarterly NEPA logs. Next slide. So if you did submit the NEPA statement of work, number 1, you will have a requirement to submit quarterly NEPA logs. And we do ask that you complete the NEPA log prior to initiating any activities. So the intent of the NEPA logs is to help you demonstrate to DOE that you are following all of the requirements of your NEPA determination, and all of those restrictions are met. So it is really critical that you complete the NEPA log prior to starting your project. It really serves as a check and balance so that we can verify that you are adhering to the restrictions of your NEPA determination. If you want the quarterly reports, the quarterly NEPA logs are required again quarterly, but if you want to submit them early before the deadline, you are free to do that, and that allows our team to review those, to follow up with you if there's any potential compliance issues. You do not have to wait until that quarterly deadline to submit them. I know I get a lot of recipients that will reach out if they have questions about filling out the report, and they just want to submit it early to ensure that they're filling it out completely before they start the project. So it's really important to report on all activities. We've had some questions about, are you required to just report on ground disturbing activities? And that is not the case. If you read your NEPA determination as well as the NEPA log, you really need to report on all activities that you are spending DOE funds on. The other question that we get a lot is you only need to report once for the same activity. So don't submit in subsequent quarters for the same action that you've already reported on. You will see on the NEPA log, there is a box that you can check that says no new activities. So if that is the case, if you've already submitted a quarterly NEPA log for the activity that you are proposing and nothing has changed, there's no new activities or a change in your project overall, go ahead and check that box and then just submit it. So that allows us to know that you're on track. You don't have to fill anything else out. You do have to sign the NEPA log on the bottom, but you don't have to fill out any of the other fields. The email address for those NEPA logs is listed here. It is eecbg.nepa@ee.doe.gov. And you definitely want to include the voucher team on that as well. So we have included here the link as well for the NEPA log templates for if you have any questions as to which NEPA log or how to complete them, do not hesitate reaching out. We really want to ensure that they're completed correctly and before any activities have started. So don't hesitate reaching out. And I think that's the last slide. Is there one more? There is, sorry. So we did want to touch on the historic preservation report. As we said, it's due September 15th. It can
Diana,
only be...
I can actually
sorry?
take this back over.
Oh,
I can take this
okay.
back over for you.
Go right ahead. Thanks.
Sorry about that. Thank you. Thanks, Diana, for that deep dive into NEPA. I think it's really helpful to know the context of why these reports are due. And she pointed out something really important is that even though we present these reports in a certain order in this presentation, that doesn't mean that they're due in that order, right? And so if you've just got a project approved and you know you have reporting requirements and you're not really sure where to start, NEPA is probably the best place you can start. Like Diana was saying, a lot of the reviews should take place before you actually begin your project. And so it's great to check that off right away and just know that you're in compliance there. And because Diana did such a great job doing a deep dive, we're not going to get into much more detail here, but just wanted to highlight a couple things that are specific to voucher recipients when completing these forms. And so as she mentioned, the historic preservation report is completed using a Microsoft form that can be found on our voucher portal. But you also need to attest in the voucher portal that you actually completed and submitted that form so that we have a record that we can see. And so we just ask that once you do that, you do check it off in the portal. I also want to highlight that historic preservation report is due between September 1st and September 15th of each year. Note that you will not be able to access the link to this form outside of those dates. They want them to be submitted during that time so that everything is very timely. And just so note, if you get off this call and you go to click on it, it won't be active. If you reach out to us, we can provide a template so you can begin working on the questions of that in the meantime. And so next slide. Same thing goes for NEPA logs. While NEPA logs do have to be emailed to the NEPA office, we would also like you to submit a copy in the voucher portal so we have a record of all your grant reporting in one place. It'll just help you and us keep track of everything. So just a note to make sure for most of these reports that you're doing some sort of action in the portal to make a record of those. Next slide. Okay, and we're getting close to the end of the required reports, so hang in there. Next, we have the one-time location report. The location report is used to verify locations of EECBG program projects. This report is completed by filling out a standard Excel workbook and should be uploaded to the voucher portal. This is done by logging into the portal, selecting My Applications, clicking on the application, then reporting. The location report is due only once and can be completed anytime during the project once locations of work are known, but preferably within the first year of the project and no later than project closeout. So this is another great one to start with if you know exactly where your equipment will be installed and you don't expect those locations to change. Next slide. All right, last but not least, we have the single audit report. Single audits need to be completed by any entity that receives a certain amount of federal funding each year. If you applied before October 2024, then that threshold is $750,000 in federal funding. If you applied on or after October 1st, 2024, then that threshold will be increased to $1 million in federal funding. This includes all federal funds received by your government, not just EECBG program funding. Audits are due within 30 days of receiving an auditor's report or 9 months after the end of the auditing period. Single audits should be submitted to the Federal Audit Clearinghouse using the link referenced in this slide. Once complete, please attest submission in the voucher portal. Next slide. Okay, here we just want to make a quick note about submitting reports in the voucher portal. Mitch will highlight this in the next section, but please note that every time you go into the portal or log out and back in, your reporting forms will reset. And so it might seem like whatever you did disappeared, but rest assured that it did not. You can check on the status of your submitted reports anytime by navigating to My Applications or by selecting your application and then related lists. So there's a couple different places where you can review what you've done. You can also reach out to us if you're having a hard time finding them. Next slide. Oh, wait, we're going to review just some summary tables for your reference here. Next slide. Okay, here we have part 1 of the reporting summary tables. This consolidated list details the frequency of the reporting requirements, the name of the report, where the report should be submitted, and the due date, just as a quick reference. Again, there are 8 possible reports for the equipment rebate voucher, but not all required for every project, so please review carefully. Next slide. And then here we have the summary of the remaining reports for your reference. Next slide. All right, with that, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Mitch from ICF to do a demonstration of how to do these reports in the voucher portal.
All right, thanks, Shay. So now we're going to jump into just looking over the voucher portal and kind of highlighting all the different reports and things that you can see as you're reviewing the website. So we're going to start on the EECBG Program Formula Hub. So this is really the landing page for a lot of the resources around EECBG. So looking at kind of guidance documents, things like that. So just to point out, if you do have a hard time figuring out, okay, where's the link to the voucher portal, you can find that by navigating to this website, and then you'll see here application steps for vouchers. There's a link here that will take you straight to the voucher application portal. So I wanted to highlight that as a place if you are stuck. And again, you can always email the inbox, eecbgvouchers@icf.com, and we can point you in the right direction or help you log in if you're having any issues. So for now, let's start out. So I'm here in the voucher portal. I'm going to back up to the homepage just to quickly, survey that and show kind of how to navigate into the My Applications section, where you can go right into your application to do some of the reporting tasks. So there's My Applications here at the top. And in my account, I've got 2 applications, and you can see a few fields that explain certain statuses, the applied dates when the application was submitted. This is the project start date, and this is really the beginning start date of your period of performance for the voucher. So that's also visible here, and that's really when the application's been pre-approved and you're authorized to start your project, purchase equipment, etc. So this date could be used, for example, as your start date in the 425 form that Andrea covered before. So for project in progress, that's really the status for my project. My application's been pre-approved, and now I'm in progress. And you may be at the stage of, you've already selected a contractor, you're starting out on your project, and you have to start submitting some reports depending on the time of year. So it might be a semi-annual, it might be an annual. So in this case, if I go into my application link, I'll be able to see all the tabs that I can access to do reports, as well as review certain information that may have already been uploaded, or just kind of general information about my application. So the record detail here gives you really just fields that you have already inputted. So this is mostly really read only, and it's things that you would have put in as part of your application. So if you do need to revisit some of that to collect information, you can scroll down and survey and look through that. It will also tell you, have I submitted my SF425? This shows like what that submitted date was. So when you actually went into the portal and said you uploaded and submitted it. Also your one-time location. If you wanted to check, have I done that yet? you'll have a record of when you submitted that. So these are some fields that, again, will kind of document and record your activity in the past. So in my case, I submitted a NEPA report on the November 6th. So that's going to show here as a past activity related to reporting. But for Davis-Bacon and things like that, it's all blank for me at the moment. So I'm going to scroll back up. This next tab is called Related List. And this is really, related list really means anything associated with your application. So it might be a document or a file that was uploaded or some other kind of additional budget information on your application, things like that. So if you scroll down on this one, again, you'll see some things related to your application, like the LED lighting, heat pump in my case. So I've got some application equipment in here. And then I've got files. So I can actually click this add files, and I can at any time go in and add new files to the application. And then I've got reporting documents here. So these are things specific to the reporting tasks that we'll cover in a second here. But this is a file that I uploaded in the past associated with NEPA reporting, and it's going to show that I did that. And to find out, more detail about it, you can continue to kind of click into it, and it will give you links to that file and some more detail. If you go to related, you can see the actual file when it was uploaded, and you can add more files if needed, but you can also access that file. So if I go back, I'm just gonna navigate back to related list. So that's just a quick snapshot of some ways you can see your past activity and what's currently in your application record associated with both the application as well as some of the reporting tasks that you may have already completed in a previous quarter or previous year even. So moving on, this reporting tab is the third tab in this section. So again, we're in My Applications. We've gone into an application that's project in progress. And now if we click into reporting, this is really the kind of core section for a lot of the program reports that Shay explained and really outlined. So this page here in reporting, you'll be able to kind of review the instructions here at the top. It gives you a little more detail of like where to find things that you may have done in the past, where you can look for previously uploaded documents, things like that. And then we have a section for reports that are required for all applicants. And again, it's not in any particular chronological order. It's really the top group of reports these are ones that you're going to have to do required for all applicants. And then as we scroll down, we passed one-time location, and then now annual historic preservation, which again is a specific time of year when that's really opened up. And then as we get down, we have reports that are only if applicable. So these may or may not apply to your project, and those reports kind of flow down from there. So let me just scroll back to the top to just highlight a couple of things, though, specifically on the SF 425, the financial report. So we really covered that in detail before, but I just wanted to point out that we do have that annotated sort of pre-filled SF 425 available here as a link to review. This is the copy that Andrea reviewed with all the specifics on how to fill out different fields. So you can look at that here, and then this is a link to actually get a blank SF 425 when you're ready to download that and fill it out, and then you upload it here. So as I go down, there are ways you can, for NEPA reporting, this is going to ask you a question to then prompt you to do additional tasks if your answer to the question requires you to upload NEPA logs. So basically it's asking you, did you submit a NEPA SO1, which would be a project that involves ground disturbing activities. And if you say no, because you're used a NEPA SO2, then really you've answered the question, and then you hit submit, and that's really your NEPA reporting task that you complete there. But if you are doing a ground disturbing project, say it's an EV charging station that's going to require some excavation and conduit that needs to go underground, things like that, You may have a SO1 and ground disturbance. You say yes, and then here you're going to have some more detail as well as the opportunity to upload your NEPA log. And then, of course, a link to get an actual NEPA log here that you can fill out, and then an upload here, and then you hit submit. So that's really the NEPA process. Again, it's going to depend what type of project you have, if you have to upload something or not. And then with Davis-Bacon reporting, similarly, there's a question that will prompt you. And if you say that your project is required to comply with Davis-Bacon Act standards, so this would be you're using contracted labor as part of your installation of equipment. Therefore, you must pay them at prevailing wages and report on Davis-Bacon compliance. If that's a yes to that question, then you're going to have some additional Davis-Bacon tasks to do and some directions here around how to do weekly payroll reports using LCP Tracker, as well as the semi-annual, which is a every 6-month report that's filled out using this link here. So, and again, if you say, no, my project, for example, you might just be purchasing an electric vehicle, therefore there's no contracted labor, you say no here, and then you submit, and you're done with Davis-Bacon reporting, essentially. But if you do say yes, there are some additional steps here and some instructions to follow. And first off, the weekly payroll report process, the first step is to register in this LCP Tracker system. And to do that, there's a form that's part of the portal here, which I'll show in a moment. And you'll complete that form, submit it, and then that will be step 1 to get started on LCP Tracker. And then secondly, the semi-annual Davis-Bacon Act reports are really just the process entails filling out the Microsoft form. And again, the time scale and deadlines for that, you fill out one for the period October 1 to March 31, and then another April 1 to September 30th. And here's some tips here. There's a couple of bullets here that give you the number that you need to fill out. So take note of that when you start this form. Have this window open, and you may need to reference what this number is, as well as your application ID, which is in the application system as well. So basically, those two things are important to note. And then when you fill this out, you'll be able to go in and just, if you haven't started your project, as Shay mentioned, you still need to fill this out, and you'll put NA or zeros for questions where there's no, labor that's been started yet. So really, that's the extent of that. You do have a dropdown for indicating which semi-annual report has been completed, and you'll want to specify that after you've done your actual form. You've submitted that form. You'll come in and just say, we did the April to September version for 2024, and then you hit submit, and that's done. And then lastly, single audit report. Again, we covered the details here, but this is really the process. If you do need to provide it, it gives you some direction on how to upload it, or if it's uploaded into the Federal Clearinghouse website, then there's really no action to take. So that's really the section here on single audit. And then really, you're not uploading the single audit on this portal. You're really just assuring that it was uploaded to the Federal Clearinghouse, and then just saying yes or no to that. And if it's yes, you'll hit submit, and then that's done. So that's really the reporting tab. So as I scroll back up, these additional tabs, so there's really 4 more, and I'll cover those pretty quickly, but the LCP Tracker registration, again, is tied specifically to if you need to do Davis-Bacon Act reporting, you'll need to start the process of registering an LCP Tracker by going into this tab and filling in the required fields. And this tab really should take, 15 or so minutes at the most to fill out. Once you get this information straight, there's basically, some contact details, and then you'll need to go into sam.gov if you haven't already to figure out what your wage determination number is, and then the date that that wage determination was determined. And then there's some information on the project timeline and kind of where things are in the status of your project. So that's LCP tracker. That's step one if you're going to do any Davis-Bacon reporting for weekly certified payrolls. And then the annual performance report, this is due as part of any projects that have been pre-approved previous to September 30th for the last year. So really we're capturing project activity through the fiscal year end date of September 30th, 2024. And then for next year, this cycle will sort of kick off with another deadline of activity through the current year ending September 30th. And then that annual performance report would be due October 31st, 2025. So these are pretty straightforward reports. It's really capturing milestones and some qualitative information on how the project's going. And again, if there's been no activity through the reporting period of September 30th of the current year, then as you scroll through here, you can read the instructions, but basically it asks you to say, no, there's been no activity, in which case you can say no to the question here. And that will be kind of the extent of the performance report. You're sort of opting out of it by saying we haven't done anything, we haven't started our project. It's just been pre-approved at this point, and we're, kind of waiting to initiate any activities. In that case, it's a no, and that's again through September 30th is the time scale there, and the reporting period of the current year. You would go next, and that would be the extent of it. But if you have started activities, so say you've selected a contractor, you've already done some initial purchasing of equipment, and you would then say, and that may have occurred in say early September of 2024. So there'd be yes to the answer there, and then you would go next and have to again complete this pretty quick form. There's several sections here, and this part is actually pre-populated, so it's basically going to be a quick process for this page one. And then you enter one milestone here. So say I'm purchasing 2 EVs as part of my project. I would say 2, then save. And that's really the extent. You need to put some sort of qualitative thing saying you've done, an activity as part of your progress to date. And then here it's financial metrics. So it's more going to be equivalent to what you put into the SF 425 and reflect the financial expenditures that have been spent to date through September 30th, in this case, if it's this year. And so in my case, if I did 2 EVs, so say that's 75,000, and you would get next. So, and if you haven't spent anything there, there'd be a 0. And then process metrics, you may be ready to fill in some information here, but you may don't, it's not required if you haven't purchased anything or done anything substantive to really reflect impact metrics yet. You may not need to fill this out. But in my case, so conventional vehicles converted to alternative. So I can say here, 2, and then I'm going to keep rolling. But this part is qualitative description. So this is more some quick narrative on activities and things that have been underway so far in the year. So in some cases, you may not have information to share here, so you could just report that and say, still working on kind of updates around that. So that's really the last page of the annual performance report. And again, that's reflecting sort of the annual period, October 1 to September 30th, and then that'll be due on the 31st of October after that period end date. And the final performance report is really the same layout with slightly different numbers. For example, in financial metrics, you'll essentially have the number or the dollar value that you received in reimbursement from DOE under EECBG will load into the final performance report. And so your financial report or financial section of that report will be a simple number that is based on what was paid against your application. And then the post-installation part I'll cover really quick, but really this is a section that asks for your final documents and you certify that your project's 100% complete and all invoices have been paid. So I think there were some questions around if we do partial completion, can we submit for reimbursement that's partial? No, we're asking that the reimbursement request occurs after things are 100% complete and all invoices have been paid. And so you would check that box indicating that and then go next. And then this is where you request reimbursement. So if your pre-approved amount is 100,000, but you only spent 90,000 because your project was a little less, then that will be the amount that you're requesting in this case. And you would put that in, but maybe it's the full amount, it's 100,000, that's fine, you put that in. And then we go through and kind of follow the prompts here, but you put in invoices and you drop your files in and then move through the process. So that's really the key sections here. So I'm gonna kind of pause and I think transition off and we'll go to the next section of the webinar. I did want to highlight really quickly, Shay brought up this page view in her slide, but there is a place where you can see, again, submitted program reports, and then you can, if you saved your performance report because you were in process and you needed to hit save for later, which is a hyperlinked option there to save your performance report as you're doing it because you have to jump and go to a meeting or something. You can go back in and access saved draft performance reports here. And then you can also look at what you may have submitted in the past. There'll be a record of that in your submitted performance reports. And so a lot of that you'll want to keep in mind is accessible here along with your submitted application, which again, you access here and then you go back and see the different tabs where you can do your uploads and do your other reports. So with that, I think I will hand it over to Alvaro, who will wrap things up, and we'll also have a little bit of time for questions.
As Mitch was stating, we will now be going through the various reporting resources that EECBG has available. So first up, we have the EECBG Bipartisan Infrastructure Law Process Metrics. This specific document is a comprehensive list of all the metric items collected by the EECBG program, divided by metric area and process. This will allow you to find the specific metric items that apply to your project for accurate and comprehensive reporting. Next up, we have the Davis-Bacon Act requirements for recipients of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law Bill funding. This webpage contains various DBA reporting guides, including general guidance and information on weekly pay compliance options, weekly DBA payroll tracking through LCP Tracker, and the semi-annual Davis-Bacon report. For those entities that have an allocation amount over $250,000 or more, EECBG has a webpage dedicated to Build America, Buy America, with background and compliance information, as well as steps on requesting a waiver. Last up on this slide, we have the National Environmental Policy Act reporting, with a webpage dedicated to listing all of the available executed programmatic agreements and our link to the annual historic preservation report. You can also reach us through the EECBG program inbox provided below, and you can also sign up for office hours, which are held bi-weekly on Fridays at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Also, if you are concerned about reporting requirements, you can see our streamlined projects one-pager, linked in this specific slide, for more tips and tricks. In addition to all the previously mentioned resources, we have our EECBG Blueprint Cohorts meetings. These are monthly meetings that are led by experts and are attended by EECBG program peers with similar projects. They generally consist of 90-minute monthly sessions that follow a curriculum to provide background and context for energy work and provide ample time for connection, communication, and troubleshooting between grantees. They also help provide an opportunity for networking and coordinating with other participants. Here are some frequently asked questions. So, should I submit multiple tangible personal property reports, post-installation reports, for reimbursement if I have a multi-phased project? No. You will wait until all projects are complete and file a single report. You will be issued a single reimbursement payment for all projects. Should I submit a separate tangible personal property report, post-installation report, for each item of equipment purchased? Again, no. You will list all equipment purchases on a single post-installation report. Is the equipment I installed for my EECBG project considered government-owned? No. Property is only considered government-owned when DOE is listed in the title. How do I determine if BABA applies to my project? Well, if your EECBG allocation is under $250,000, you are exempt from BABA. If your EECBG allocation is over $250,000, BABA applies to your project. How do I report on BABA compliance? There is no formal report for BABA. However, you should be able to demonstrate compliance upon request, if asked, as part of a monitoring procedures. A letter from the equipment manufacturer certifying BABA compliance is sufficient in these cases for verification. What is an EQ1 and how do I know if I need one? Do EQ1s need NEPA logs? So an EQ1 or an environmental questionnaire is needed for projects that do not align with the scopes listed in the NEPA statement of works. So for example, solar arrays that are larger than 60 kilowatts. And no, you will not need to submit NEPA logs if your project has an EQ1. You will have a unique project determination. I've only ordered equipment. Do I need to complete the annual performance and financial reports? Yes. If any progress has been made, you must submit annual performance and financial reports. My internal government staff is installing my equipment. Does DBA apply? No. DBA applies only when a hired contractor installs your project equipment. How do I register an LCP tracker? Please log into the Vouchers portal, to My Applications, Relevant Applications, Reporting, Davis-Bacon Act, and fill out the requested information. Should I complete DBA training, and if so, how? Yes, completing DBA training is recommended, and webinars can be found linked in this slide. How does my contractor register an LCP tracker? Once you are registered in an LCP tracker, you will be able to register your contractors. What if my contractor does not want to register an LCP tracker? The contractor will still need to provide payroll for the period of work, but you can upload it and certify it yourself in LCP Tracker. All right, now we'll be moving on to the Q&A.
Thanks, everyone. We're going to hop on, and we've pulled some questions that you've asked in the chat. We've been responding. So hopefully we've touched on nearly every question that you've submitted. So Alvaro, I can take the first question if you want to go ahead and ask it. Or do you want me to read the first question? Because I know you're just presenting. So I know a lot of you have asked in the chat about the impact of the new administration and what impact that will have on the EECBG program. So we just wanted to address that first, since we know that is something that might be on your mind. So we are continuing, business as usual. We are prioritizing, reviewing all the applications that have been submitted as quickly as possible and working to support you in your project as you work through purchasing and installing the eligible equipment. So we're definitely here for you to support you. And at this time, we cannot speculate on any changes that may or may not happen as a result of a new administration. If we have additional information to share, we will definitely be sharing that. But at this time, we are unable to speculate or guess as to if there will be any changes to our program in January. So our next question is for Shay. Is there any part of Davis-Bacon reporting that needs to be submitted if work has not commenced?
Yes.
Example, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, eager to answer questions. So the answer to that one is yes. If you know that Davis-Bacon Act is going to apply to your project, even if you haven't started that construction or really installation work, you do need to submit the semi-annual Davis-Bacon Act form. And given in the name, it's semi-annual, it's due twice a year. And so that report is due by April 21st and by October 21st every year. And you'll see some questions in there about overseeing Davis-Bacon Act. Since you haven't started any work yet, the answer to most of those will be NA. But there will be one question at the top that asks if you've awarded any contracts yet for your project. And so if you have, you can go ahead and answer yes there. It'll actually ask you for the number. So maybe one contract, you can put in one there. And then for the rest of the responses, you can put NA. If the contract hasn't been awarded yet, you can still put NA there. But we need to ensure that you are submitting those semi-annual reports for the duration of your period performance. So that starts really when you get your application approval.
Great answer, Shay. Our next question is, if a contractor enters their own payroll and there are problems, does DOE communicate directly with contractor to correct, or is the responsible entity notified?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So you, as the entity, are responsible for ensuring that the paperwork, the payroll uploaded is correct. So when we say certified payroll, it's the contractors uploading the payroll, and then you as the entity are certifying that it's correct. So if you see that the wages being reported in the payroll do not match the wage determination, you would work with the contractor to fix that. If you're having any issues with LCP Tracker itself, DOE and our LCP Tracker team is here to help resolve any technical issues with using the platform.
That's great to know. Shay, for the audit, our allocation was well below $750,000. So we don't need to submit an audit report, correct?
So not quite. It depends. Maybe, maybe not. So for the audit report, you actually need to consider all federal funding that you're getting, not just federal funding from EECBG. And it also will depend on when you applied for your application. So if you remember back to that slide in the presentation, we talked about a change in threshold for this report from $750,000 to $1 million. If you applied before October 1st, and in the last year you received less than $750,000 total for all your federal funding that you applied for, then no, you wouldn't need to submit this report for your specific question. If EECBG was the only funding that you got from the federal government in the last year, and your allocation was under 750, which it most likely was, then your answer to your question would be no, you wouldn't have to submit it. So again, you need to consider the date you applied. Before October 1st, 750 is the threshold. After October 1st, $1 million is the threshold.
All right. Thank you, Shay, for that clarification. Our next question is for Allison. And is it possible to change the scope of work subject to DOE approval after we have been approved? So, for example, changing installation from a contractor to in-house staff.
Yeah, so that is a great question. And yes, you can change your project. We definitely understand if you want to switch to a project that would not have DBA applicability, that's allowed. Please email ICF, our rebate and portal administrator. I put their email in the chat, but we can add it again. It's EECBG Vouchers at ICF.com. They'll be able to work with you to update your application information. And this is for any changes to your projects, even if it's small changes, like, oh, actually, we're going to install 500 light bulbs instead of 350. So just whenever you have questions about uploading anything related to application, please reach out to the email address that Shay just dropped into the chat.
All right, that's absolutely great to know, just in case entities want to minimize their reporting requirements and such. All right, our final question is, can you explain more on when NEPA applies?
Yeah, I can take that one. So I don't know if Diana's still here, but if Diana was on camera right now, she would say that NEPA always applies to federal funding projects. Always, always, always. And so if you're applying to this project, it means that as part of your application, you submitted a NEPA SO. That is NEPA applying to your project. But depending on what NEPA SO you used and the nature of your project, NEPA logs may or may not apply. And so historic preservation will apply if you use NEPA SO 1 or 2. So whether you're doing ground disturbing or not, you need to pay attention to the historic preservation report and you need to complete one. There are a couple projects that are actually exempt from historic preservation reporting, and that is mainly EVs, because they're not installed somewhere, right? They just exist. They're not going on a building. They're not being installed in a parking lot. And then EV charging stations also got a special exemption, but you have to make sure that those chargers are following a couple rules for them to be exempt. And so in general, if you're doing one of our projects, early on, you really want to make sure that you've reviewed your historic preservation programmatic agreement for your state, and make sure that you're in compliance for it. In terms of NEPA logs will only be required for any entities who had to use a NEPA SO 1 for their project. So that means your project indicated some sort of ground disturbance. And most commonly for vouchers, those projects are usually EV charging stations. They're getting installed outside somewhere, right? If you're doing a solar mobile charging station, it's not quite the same, but if you're installing that charger, you're going to want to do a NEPA log. And if you think you have any sort of ground disturbing activities, you definitely want to do a NEPA log.
All right, thank you so much for that clarification. That seems to be all for our Q&A.
Thank you everyone for attending. I know we're a little over time, so we appreciate it. I just dropped our team email. It goes to the full DOE voucher team. So if we weren't able to answer your question, please email us there. We are very quick to respond, and so we'll be able to assist you there. Additionally, signing up for office hours is a great way to get real-time answers to your questions. So thank you so much for attending our webinar. We look forward to working with you. Thank you for participating in the EECBG program, and have a great rest of your day.